hundreds of Zimbabweans have been waiting at the Beitbridge Border Post for some days to come into South Africa. Although the situation better today, there have been major delays, and most do not have proper documentation, while others have produced fake COVID-19 test certificates. Over 100 people tested positive for COVID-19 at the troubled border post. One expert says the situation at the border gate is becoming a humanitarian situation. To discuss this further, I'm joined by Political Analyst Ibbo Mandaza. Thank you very much, Mr. Mandaza, for joining us here on eNCA. Now, our authorities here in South Africa say that they have had to do a lot to make sure people are able to move around the border after 3 days. Some people saying they waited 3 days, and of course those reports last year of 15 people dying while waiting at the border post. What are authorities in Zimbabwe saying about this problem?
Well, first, let me start with just 3 points. The first is that what has happened at Beitbridge over the festive season and up to now speaks volumes about the cynical behavior or attitude of the South African government, in particular the Ministry of Home Affairs. I saw the Minister of Home Affairs a few days ago trying to rush to defend the indefensible. To let people go across the border without testing, it was almost like saying, go back to your country and die there. Except that in this case, we know that the variant, the recent pandemic variant is coming from South Africa. So you can imagine the implications of what has happened at Beitbridge. You will see the spike on the Zimbabwean side already. People are dying in their dozens as we speak. The second point, of course, is about the obvious abject failure of the Zimbabwean government, which found the other side of the border without any quarantine facilities at all. Complete breakdown of the system. And one wonders whether there is, in fact, an anti-COVID system in Zimbabwe worth talking about. The third point is that it exposes Southern Africa, SADC in particular, as a failed case where there's been little or no coordination between the member states to deal with this pandemic. And so we have it. That's what the problem is. Zimbabwean authorities, to answer your question, have said nothing. They have nothing to say because their level of capability is higher than that of South Africa. So they will say nothing. They cannot say anything except denialism.
So they haven't done anything, for instance, probably just for the two countries to try and find a better solution, because we do know, of course, that the Beitbridge Border Post has always been a border post that is packed, but this time it was worse because of having to test and those long queues to screen people, etc. So nothing from the Zimbabwean side to try and see what we can do to alleviate pressure there.
Well, the first thing that the Zimbabwean government should have done was to complain at the cynical behavior of the South African side, of simply letting people across in their hundreds without a due procedure in terms of testing. That they couldn't do that is evidence that their sense of responsibility, their capability is much higher, because they are found without any quarantine facilities on the other side of the border.
Let's talk a little bit more, Mr. Mandaza, about them having no quarantine facilities once people arrive that side. Of course, people wanting to go back home. We saw a gentleman, for instance, live on our TV channel saying he hasn't seen his wife and kids in a year, and he just wanted to go there, but he was in the queue for about 3 to 5 days waiting to go through. So let's talk a little bit more about the implications that Zimbabwe doesn't have these facilities to help its own citizens isolate.
Well, it's a serious situation, as you can see from our own media reports, and the extent to which the Deputy Minister of Health yesterday made a statement to the effect that Zimbabwe as a whole is now a hotspot for the pandemic. You know, that coming from the authorities is quite telling. But of course, there's the other element where we know now that those who have successfully come home to Zimbabwe over the festive season, and many of whom may have left the virus here in Zimbabwe, are now held up at Beitbridge, not being allowed across to go back to work. And there's a kind of a suggestion that perhaps South Africa is using this opportunity to keep out Zimbabweans who had been in South Africa before.
Who is this? Where does this notion come from? Who is saying this?
Well, there are complaints at the Beitbridge border by Zimbabweans who are unable to go back to South Africa. You've seen video footage of hundreds and hundreds of Zimbabweans trying to cross. Admittedly, many of these are border jumpers, but there are also many more who are legitimate residents and or employees in South Africa who are being refused back into the country.
Do you agree, though, Mr. Mandaza, that, for instance, if we just talk about those who are border jumpers, that it's very important, of course, to get into a country with lawfully, rather, so that you are at least registered and that the country is aware that you are there, whether it's South Africans going to Zimbabwe or Zimbabweans coming this side?
I agree entirely. And I also agree and acknowledge that the problem is not so much on the South African side than it is on the Zimbabwean side. We have a broken country, and the hordes of people, the hundreds and thousands of people at the Beitbridge border, and the stream of economic refugees over the last 20 years is evidence that we, as Zimbabwe, are a broken country.
Just a very short one. Sorry, Mr. Mandaza.
We have become a burden on our neighbors, no doubt about that. That said, it does not justify the kind of cynical reaction on the part of South African authorities. As I said earlier, it requires a much more organized strategy on the part of SADC to deal with this problem.
Just a very
it's not only
quick one,
Zimbabwe, there are
short...
Mozambicans, there are people streaming
Mr.
across
Mandaza,
as far as Zambia.
I'm just running out of time, sir. I just need to ask you just one more question very quickly. It's about journalist Hopewell Chinono. He's saying that he's been arrested again. He says that the government or the authorities are saying it's because he's spreading false information about a child being beaten to death by authorities. What's happening there?
Well, it's very difficult to understand, the level of harassment of journalists, in particular. Chinono is now Legion. The incident about which he is said to have been arrested has been viral in the media. And it was not him who broke the news. If anything, he was only echoing what had already been said about that incident. So one finds it very, well, it's not surprising at all. He is a target, and that has been shown to be the case for the last 3 months.
All right. Thank you so much. That is, of course, Ibbo Mandaza, a political analyst, speaking to us live from Zimbabwe.